Morning. Welcome to Gimpy's History Corner, named for my two grandsons, Archie and Alice, who call me Gimpy. Here they are at a restaurant having a good time. Archie and Alice, great kids. Okay, I'm going to do a double recording today, and the common theme is a character known as Sherlock Holmes. Both videos today will have some Sherlock Holmes involvement. The first one is about the author, Arthur Conan Doyle, the author of Sherlock Holmes stories. He was born in Edinburgh, Scotland, May 22nd, 1859, right before the American Civil War. His father was Charles Altamont Doyle. He was English-born artist living in Scotland. He was Catholic and unfortunately alcoholic and mentally ill. His mother was Mary Foley, an Irish Catholic, with a strong storytelling tradition, which is where Arthur got his talent. Arthur was the second of 10 children, and in 1864, the family had to split due to father's alcoholism, and Arthur lived with his aunt. 1867, the family reunited in a very poor neighborhood, and father was eventually institutionalized and died in 1893. So, not a good start for Arthur. Very poor family, large Catholic family, second of 10 children with an alcoholic father. He started his education in 1868 with the Jesuits at Stonyhurst College, with additional years at a Jesuit school in Austria. For some reason, he thought it was important to learn German. Must have been a cultural thing at that time. 1876, he enrolled at Edinburgh University College of Medicine to become a doctor. And one of his teachers was a man by the name of Joseph Bell, who had keen observational skills and is thought to be the model for the Sherlock Holmes character. 1879, he published 2 short stories anonymously. He was still a doctor and didn't want to be known as an author at this point, but he did want to start his writing career. 1887, Sherlock Holmes made his first appearance in A Study in Scarlet. The first appearance of Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson, and was published in Breton's Christmas Annual. This time in history, the late 1800s, magazines was a huge way of publishing. People had all kinds of magazines in their homes, and authors would write serials. They would write a long piece that would be broken into maybe 3 or 4 pieces and published each month, and that would attract them back to that magazine to sell more issues. So A Study in Scarlet was the first in 1887, and it was in Breton's Christmas Annual. The next was 1890, The Sign of 4, introduced Watson's eventual wife, Mary Marston. Watson is always portrayed in different movies and TV shows as kind of not the smartest guy, but a good doctor. And he's the one that brings the gun to the dangerous situations. So I've seen him portrayed differently in different shows. 1901, 1902 was The Hound of the Baskervilles. It was one of his more famous, longer stories. It was serialized in Strand magazine. Strand was a major publisher of Sherlock Holmes. 1914 to 15, A Valley of Fear was the last novel serialized in Strand. He had several short stories collections, 12 stories in Strand, 1891 to 92. Memoirs of Sherlock Holmes, 1894, had 11 stories that ended with the final problem, which was Holmes's apparent death at Reichenbach Falls. Why would Doyle want to stop writing Sherlock Holmes stories? They're so popular and bringing in so much money. Well, he considered Holmes an elementary form of fiction, not a high level. It was distracting him from writing historical novels. So, a crazy decision. As you'll see, it caused a backlash. The public backlash at Holmes's apparent death was immense. 20,000 people canceled their subscriptions to Strand magazine. People wore black armbands as if Sherlock Holmes was a real person who had died. They were in mourning. So Doyle gave in to his public outcry and wrote the Adventure of the Empty House, in which Holmes returns and explains to Watson that he really didn't die when he fell off the cliff at Reichenbach Falls with the evil Dr. Moriarty, but that he had been off doing secret missions, taking care of Moriarty's crew, I guess you'd call them. And the story of the empty house is where he takes care of Moriarty's last apprentice, Colonel Moran. Okay, and then came 13 more stories in a section called Return of Sherlock Holmes. 8 more stories in His Last Bow. 12 more stories in the Case Book of Sherlock Holmes. And in 1914, he retired Holmes to be a beekeeper in Sussex. And there was a great movie made by this several years ago about him being an old man in Sussex, taking care of bees. Okay, so what else? So it wasn't just Sherlock Holmes stories. He wrote 4 historical novels, 4 science fiction novels, 3 spiritualism books. He was big into spiritualism. He had a son that was killed in the war, and just like Mary Lincoln wanted to keep contacting her dead sons, Arthur Conan Doyle wanted to keep contacting his dead kids. 3 mystery novels that did not involve Sherlock Holmes. He was knighted in 1902, became Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and he died in 1930 at the age of 71. According to the experts, the works of Sherlock Holmes, the fiction of Sherlock Holmes has been put on TV or film more than any other work of fiction in the English language. Isn't that incredible? I watched Sherlock Holmes last night. Cushing was the actor's name who played Sherlock Holmes in this version. Great actors do Sherlock Holmes over the years. So, Sherlock Holmes was a great character, and today you can go to London. They've created, because he didn't exist really, at 221B Baker Street. That was just made up. So they've created a 221 Baker Street and recreated what they think his flat would be with Dr. Watson, which would be a open area where they had their meals and had a fireplace and several chairs and desks and chemistry sets set up, and then 2 bedrooms off of that where the 2 men lived. They were both bachelors when they started. Dr. Watson got married, moved out, but came back and had adventures with Sherlock Holmes on occasion, and supposedly kept writing his books and stories. Of course, this was all fiction, but people just thought it was so great. Such great stories, they thought Sherlock Holmes was a real person. Isn't that incredible? I love Sherlock Holmes stories. I'll show you what I have in my house. I have these 2 versions. This gray one is the first ones, with The Study in Scarlet being number 1. And the next one are the stories after he came back from his apparent death. The Return of Sherlock Holmes, Hounds of the Baskervilles, Valley of Fear. Just imagine all that writing done by one guy. And also today, Sherlock Holmes is one of the most numerous fan fiction writings. In other words, other writers have started writing Sherlock Holmes stories. I've read several of those. They're very good. I have one here somewhere. I should have got it out. This is one of my prized possessions. This was the annotated version of Sherlock Holmes. And it has much of the artwork in it from Strand magazine, where they would have artists depict scenes from Sherlock Holmes stories and put them in the magazine to make people think that Sherlock Holmes was a real person. So these characters that you read about can be seen in what people would think would be real life. And you see the attire of the late 1800s. So some things about Sherlock Holmes were kind of made up in magazines, like the Deer Slayer hats. I don't think those were ever actually mentioned in stories anywhere. So I'm not sure how that got started. Some artist just took exception or decided he would add that thing, but it became part of his lore. But it was a period in history, the late 1800s. I guess that would be the Victorian era in England. And this annotated version has The Return of Sherlock Holmes, The Last Bow, and the Casebook of Sherlock Holmes. So this would be volume 2. These are the later stories. And it has annotations next to the actual writing where they would explain what this meant or that meant. I found it very helpful. So as you can see, I'm a big Sherlock Holmes fan. Okay, the next story will involve a mention of Sherlock Holmes, but it is in America. Stay tuned for that one.